Welcome back, everyone, to Behind the Shield, episode number 24. I'm your host, Marco Estrela. I'm happy you decided to join us today for a live taping of our podcast this month. And you'll be glad you did, because we have a great show in store for you. We have the fan favorite hot topic segment. As usual, we have some really good hot topics today to share with you. But folks, we have a super interesting spotlight speaker today, delivered to you by Lisa Jones-Huff, Senior Director at Elastic. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
Lisa.
I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I have a feeling we need some sort of like a sound effect.
Yeah. I need some walk-on music. Ba-dum, ba-ba-dum.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk to production, see if it's in the budget. So, Lisa, welcome to the podcast. Can you give our audience a little bit about your background, what you do? Yep. I called you a senior director, but your official title there, and what's your day-to-day?
Yeah. So, Lisa Jones-Huff, I live in Austin, Texas. I am the senior director of the global security specialist. That's a mouthful at Elastic. What I do is Elastic is a platform, but I laser focus on the security solution. I've been in SIEM for, I'm going to age myself, over 25 years. I got my start at a company called ArcSight many moons ago. Mm-hmm. And I was doing deep packet inspection for a company called Slayer Networks, and I was doing threat intelligence. And most recently, before Elastic, I was at a company called Exabeam, focusing on user behavior analytics. So nice. I'm glad that had an opportunity to speak with you guys today.
Thank you.
Well, you are most welcome on the show. Later on, you will give us a talk on artificial intelligence, how it's transforming the daily jobs of cybersecurity analysts all around the world. So we employ many of these. So I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that. Okay. And that reminds me, seeing us today is a live taping of Behind the Shield. Everyone listening to us live at the moment, you can submit your questions in the Zoom Q&A interface. And then at the very end of the show, you can actually submit questions to anything you hear on the show, but particularly on that spotlight talk. And then I'll share questions with Lisa after her talk. Okay, so we'll look forward to that a little bit later. In the meantime, let me introduce our trusty panelists of cyber security experts. From Montreal, we have Virtual Guardian CEO, Patrick Naoum. Hey, Pat.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Glad to be back.
From St. Paul, Minnesota, we have Virtual Guardian USA President, Bill Strub. Hey, Bill.
Hello, and thank you, everyone, for their time today.
And from West Virginia, Virtual Guardian Senior Director, U.S. National Sales and Solution Architects, Jason Williams. Hey, Jason.
Hello. Great to be back.
All right. So before we get into hot topics directly, there's some there's some news nonstop, obviously, but there was a little bit of actually, I won't minimize it by saying a little bit. There was a pretty bad incident there in Lebanon, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on that situation. It's the pager situation, I guess we'll call it. So those pagers blowing up simultaneously. As a matter of fact, several thousand pagers blowing up simultaneously. And then
8,500 or so, and then walkie-talkies as well.
Walkie-talkies.
And then the walkie-talkies the following day, which was just yesterday, killing another 20 people. So several thousand people injured, couple dozen, I believe, dead. So what are your thoughts on this new type of attack?
Are we going to go there?
Well, I mean, just your quick. It's an appetizer for the hot topic, but I wanted to see, because it is a Wi-Fi attack. It is an information-based attack.
It's a supply chain attack.
Pardon me?
It's a supply chain attack.
Supply chain attack. There you go.
Yep. And not a software supply chain attack.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay out of the politics and just say that it's unfortunate that these are essentially blind weapons in the sense that you don't know who's going to be on the other end of that device. Yeah. And therefore, the kinetic component of it is in my personal opinion, a little distasteful, more than a little. That's about as close to being on the political cusp as I'm going to get today on that one.
Yeah, I think to the point, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families that are affected, no matter what side you're on, and because it's a loss overall. But to the points made, I mean, you start to look at what can be weaponized. Before we were thinking that pagers and walkie-talkies were safe, right? Because of the fact that if you could put that in a little Faraday cage or something that could block any type of EMP, that was going to be your communications moving forward. And now you think about this, and it's like, to the point made, anything can be weaponized to an extent now, whether it's something blowing up at PLC, or now we're looking at beepers and phones or walkie-talkies. So it's almost like law-abiding citizen movie comes to realization now, right? So
now you just said I'm glad you went there, because we all have a device in our pockets, and there's much more than 8,500 of them in Canada and the US. There's millions of them, and we all have one in our pockets.
They're bidirectional communications.
So
the pager was only inbound, right? So you could it received signals, can't send signals. Frankly, I was surprised that pagers are still being manufactured. That was my man.
So it's tough, but now you have to be cognizant of everything now, and so you can't be asleep at the wheel. You have to make sure that, to an extent, you have you're protected. But at that point, I mean, unless you have a Faraday cage and you're walking around with RFID blockers and everything's in them, or carrying around a microwave, like Edward Snowden, it's going to be pretty tough.
I think it's going to be the impact of on Hezbollah, the mental impact that it's going to have, that they can't trust any mode of communication moving forward. They already got rid of their cell phones for a particular reason.
Right. Yeah.
Moved to pagers. And I think that it's from a tactical perspective, now everything comes under question. I think that's
different side of rules of engagement coming from the military side. So
yeah, exactly.
So we're not overly worried about the cell phones?
I think everything.
No, but I mean, someone inserted C4, or it's not just the battery that overheated with the speed at which, lithium batteries have been seen to burn up and whatnot. If you remember the Dell laptop episode, in this case, someone inserted explosive material in these devices. So, yeah.
Okay. A question already from the audience. My goodness. Not with regards to this, but they're asking whether or not Virtual Guardian will be becoming an Elastic partner. My goodness.
Okay, who's asking? Is that Eliane asking the question?
Eliane, I don't know. No, it's anonymous, unfortunately.
The paperwork has already been signed.
It depends on how well they treat me today. We'll see. I don't know.
Oh, there we go. Great answer.
Yeah, it could always be torn up, right?
That's right. Partnerships are bidirectional. So
that's right.
Excellent comment.
An anonymous person asking.
On that note, let's dive into our hot topic segment, shall we? And we will let Lisa go first. Our guest has decided to pitch in. So you're doing double duty today, Lisa. Thank you very much. You wanted to talk to us about the kind of landscape of mergers and acquisitions in the SIEM and analytics space.
Yeah.
So tell us what you're seeing out there.
Yeah. So as a lot of you may know, especially in the SIEM and analytics space, there have been a lot of changes this year with Exabeam merging with Logarithm, QRadar's a portion of QRadar's SIEM business moving over into Palo Alto.
Yes.
And, there have been other acquisitions of CrowdStrike purchasing Humio. And so you're starting to see that there are a lot of companies that are either through merger or acquisition, changing the landscape. And now everyone's talking about a platform. Right. Mm-hmm. And those platforms have a multitude of products that are tied to it that may be, security, observability, and other solutions. So, where I was going with this is that, in the past, customers have made investments in best of breed. I want the best of breed endpoint. I want the best of breed this. I want the best of breed that. And they can, cover disparate vendors. But now when you start to see some of these mergers and acquisitions, companies like Palo Alto and Elastic and a lot of these folks are starting to talk about a platform story. So the question is, are companies going to start to go down the path of wanting to consolidate and go down the path of a single vendor, or will they still continue to want to do best of breed?
Well, CrowdStrike has recently demonstrated that there's a risk.
I was not teeing that up. I just want to make that very clear.
I knew that was going to come up. Patrick,
say the same about Microsoft.
Well, but it's true.
Well.
Yeah. But
yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, no, I mean, we touched on this on the last podcast, right? I think that folks will go best of breed. There are some folks, some organizations that they're looking at the consolidated play and tools rationalization and seeing what they can get out of the investments that they're making. But to the point made, with the new sacrificial lamb, that being CrowdStrike, do you want to put all your operational availability into a single platform that at any time could be a risk? So, to put it that way, you have to look at how the operation, what that risk will look like, but also be able to say, I can manage multiple solutions in a defense in depth approach to be operationally resilient against situations like this.
I'm not against the platform play, far from it, but there's a certain extent to which an organization should go to. And where I really am adamant about drawing the line is the SIEM. Right, because if you look at Microsoft, you look at PA, you look at CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike recently have their new next gen SIEM out there.
Right.
So if you're going to consolidate around a platform player, at the very least, keep the SIEM aside. You cannot have the surveillance and monitoring of your security infrastructure done by the same platform player in which you have all these investments in all their tools. So that's where I would be careful in terms of drawing the line. Now, best of breed is a good approach, but platform, there's something to be said for platform plays because there are proliferation of tools out there. But when it comes to the SIEM, when it comes to surveillance, monitoring, that's where I would draw the line in terms of full integration.
The other thought that I have, and I smile a little bit as I say this because I'm guilty here myself, but when you choose a best of breed solution and you invest in it, don't be surprised when that becomes part of somebody else's platform.
Right.
All these organizations are looking to continue to bolt on to what they're currently operating with to improve.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what that best of breed solution is going to look like 1 year, 5 years down the road.
Yeah. And one of the things for me is that when, I speak to customers and you think about the best of breed approach, a lot of customers aren't using 100% of all the capabilities of these products in the first place. So in many cases, there might be products that are out there that can get them the outcome that they want, but it doesn't have the name recognition. You know what I mean? Yes. So I think that in many cases, I think vendors need to make sure that they're going in and don't get into a tick box war with other, capabilities and just understand what is your desired outcome and make sure that your product can align to that outcome.
That's right.
Absolutely. So putting all the eggs in the proverbial basket might not always be a good idea, but Bill, I like your point also. Who knows what happens 2-3 years down the line. All right, great. Off to a good start. Thank you, Lisa. Let's move on to Jason. Jason, your article, what interests you was Microsoft deciding something pretty important these days that may impact a lot of EDR clients. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think, we've already kind of spoken about operational resiliency and some of the impacts that we've seen there with certain vendors. And Microsoft is reverting back to their approach of reevaluating who has access to the OS at a deeper level, and that being the kernel level. And so, as you all know, coming from my background in anti-ransomware and things like that, being able to combat adversaries at a low level inside any OS, whether that's Microsoft or Linux or Apple, is crucial, right? I mean, to the point, Apple has done a great job in locking that down, where most of the time the effects to Apple are really because of pirated software being entered into that mix. But you look at it from a Microsoft and Linux side of the house, Linux a little bit tougher, but Microsoft has reopened access where kernel drivers and mini filters, and not to geek out where I have some fun, can operate at a low level. So they're going back to what happened in the mid 2000s, similar to what happened to Symantec back in the day, where everybody got kicked out of userland. So they're going to reevaluate the access to kernel. And if that does take the next form, it is a very big investment and reevaluation, not only from a Microsoft standpoint, but also from an EDR or any type of endpoint technology that has capabilities to access syscall and some of those low-level processes to determine adversarial attacks at that next level. And if they have to reevaluate and those drivers have to be moved out, it opens up risk to a Microsoft operating system from an adversary that has the sophistication to be able to operate at a low level and compromise rootkits and things like that, where, when you do have these EDRs hooked at a various level in the OS at a deeper level, they can mitigate those types of attacks. So to the point being, it's very interesting, the next wave of this evolution from the event that happened in July and where Microsoft is going to try to take it. But it's also going to be interesting where the EDRs are going to come into play, or any endpoint technology, to be able to, number one, integrate, to be able to be complementary, as well as to be approved by Microsoft, what level of visibility they'll have and mitigation capabilities from their controls at that lower level if they get sidebarred to an NTDLL type of environment with an alias or something like that. So again, more to come. Microsoft released that announcement that's been going over Bleeping Computer and others, but it's going to be interesting on how that affects organizations, both from a vendor perspective as well as a client perspective.
Is your company digitally resilient? 75% of small businesses have no disaster recovery plan, and backup copies do not guarantee an organization's ability to get back to business. For more than 25 years, ESI Technologies has specialized in IT continuity, reducing financial and operational impacts for our clients. Learn more about digital resilience from ESI's experts at esitechnologies.com.
How does this make it more difficult, Jason, for people to roll out new endpoints? I'm thinking specifically like trying to do deployments in Mac as the example, where frankly it takes development a lot longer, and the approval process takes a lot more time.
The deployment packaging solutions to be able to roll out is pretty unique. You have Intune, SCCM, Avanti. You have other solutions like that can push those packages out seamlessly. But I think that at this point, it's still going to be unique on how that moves forward. But if organizations from a driver perspective get back to that N-1 perspective, where they separate threat intelligence updates, model updates, adversarial information that enriches the capabilities of that EDR or endpoint technology to operate, from a driver update that is agnostic potentially of model updates and things like that, it might be a lot better and help in that area than just booting out and saying, hey, you don't have access. So no matter if it's a driver update, a mini filter, or a model update to the threat intelligence piece to be able to mitigate advanced or 0 days, it's going to be interesting.
I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but I thought I saw yesterday, I know that Satya Nadella was at the Falcon conference with CrowdStrike. Didn't they mention something about adding an additional layer around the kernel for certain services? Did I misread that, or?
I mean, that's what syscalls are made for, and callback tables and things like that. But you still have to have some plugins. So it really, if that happens, in all honesty, that's a bigger uplift from Microsoft to be able to add a 1.5 in between, or a 0.5 in between 0 and 1 as you work out from kernel out to userland. So that'll be interesting to see how they're going to operate at that level.
Thank you very much, Jason. Patrick, you are up next, and there was some surprising news. I found it surprising. We're well familiar here at the Virtual Garden with Recorded Future, but some news came out concerning an acquisition, and that brings us back to what Lisa was just mentioning with her hot topic, all these mergers and acquisition. But tell us who acquired. Tell us who acquired. Yeah, Recorded Future.
I apologize if I cough. I have a little dust issue from my trip last week.
Okay.
So, and since I'm talking, I'm not going to be muting myself all the time. So I'm sorry. So yeah, Mastercard acquired Recorded Future. I saw this pass by this week. Actually, it happened last week for $2.65 billion. So mainstream digital business acquiring a cybersecurity company. Quite interesting. So if you guys don't know about Recorded Future, they're all about threat intelligence. So arming clients today, half of Fortune 100 companies on data intelligence in order to prevent or stifle attacks, right, on their different environments in a nutshell. And what I learned by reading more about this is that they had an initial collaboration. Obviously, Recorded Future, if you're doing a good job in threat intelligence, you're also looking and scanning the dark web. Right. So they had like a joint venture where Recorded Future would alert financial institutions when credit card numbers would appear on the dark web as a leading indicator of a potential compromise or threat. So it started that way. I guess one thing led to another to the acquisition. But I also saw that they acquired two other companies over the last while. One of them is Risk Recon in the third-party risk management arena, and another one more in terms of crypto services and payments called CipherTrace. So you see that Mastercard and a lot of, when you think about it, any purely digital transactional business should be probably thinking of making the same moves instead of buying software and investing in terms of, these different partnerships. Well, by making this acquisition, they're quite in an interesting spot because it's a win-win situation when you think about it. Actually, win-win-win if you add the financial institutions and us as clients. Because number one, the logic behind this is that all of a sudden Recorded Future gets access to billions of data points, which are the Mastercard transactions, the commerce outlets, if you will, and all the consumption profiles of resources, which could be used to prevent fraud. And by the same token, now Mastercard has privileged access to all the data that Recorded Future records and all the profiles and the use cases that, number one, are already there. But imagine the future use cases that will be able to predict and prevent fraud. It's quite an interesting acquisition. It makes all the sense in the world. And it also shows that threat intelligence. So it's not only about securing your perimeter, your data, and looking at what you have. It's finding ways to leverage AI, and Recorded Future is all about AI, but leveraging AI as a function of the amount of data points you're ingesting to prevent and to make it a more balanced and sensible approach in terms of cybersecurity, cyber resilience is the balance between protecting, investing, and versus surveillance and also preventative, action. Because if you could prevent before an action hits, well, you're able to modulate your investments in a smarter fashion than put it all on defensive mechanisms. So that was quite interesting. So it closed. Everyone seems to think it's positive. It actually also there's a number interesting numbers that I saw, because we never look at the threat intelligence market on its own. But essentially, they're predicting, this is a Forrester, I believe, that's predicting an increase. We're running currently at 11.6 billion in the threat intelligence market in 2023, expected to grow to 44 billion within the next 10 years. So that's going to keep growing, and will be definitely an extra tool in people's arsenal. And it does say a lot about the necessity to look at threat intelligence as a part of a cybersecurity, cyber resilience strategy. The other data point that kind of surprised me, because I haven't seen it, unless you calculate that a lot of vendors have threat intelligence modules that are not necessarily used, but they say on average, this is Forrester, they say on average enterprises use 6 threat intelligence tools. Found that a little high. Yeah. Then again, are they used? That's the other, or are they just a feature in an EDR or whatnot, as we know? So that was an interesting data point. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see, common known digital businesses acquiring cybersecurity companies and solutions.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because, I think I'm looking at it from the lens of recorded future.
Right.
For me, security is a data problem, right? Data is a security problem.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have, a lot of companies like Recorded Future and some others that have been doing these types of things, like you said, identifying critical business IP, in the dark web. That opens up the door for them to go outside of traditional cyber use cases,
right,
and really start to apply their solution to data problems within these financial companies and within these healthcare companies. So I think that the opportunity for those folks that are at Recorded Future, from my perspective, I would be excited if I were a part of that group right now.
The other thing is I didn't realize is that when you look at the threat or the risk profile to the credit card companies, they don't have a financial risk, right? It's the financial institutions that emit the cards that assume the risk. What they're worried about is the trust in the network. Whereas if there are continuous compromises on the credit card network,
right,
that's when Mastercard, Visa, and these guys are in trouble, because then people will not want to join the network and transact through their network. So that's why they're in there. It's the reputation and the trust in the network, not the financial aspect.
That makes sense.
Very interesting. Your move, Visa and Amex, I guess. We'll see what happens. Thanks, Patrick. Very good. That was really interesting. Bill, we are closing out Hot Topics with you, and we're jumping the pond, going to jolly old England, and some pretty weird things going on for 30,000 Tube employees. What happened?
Correct. So Transport for London, which runs the transportation network in London, going back to Patrick's hot topic, lost trust in their network is maybe the best way to put it right off the bat. I'm going to go over a little bit of a timeline because this isn't the first time TFL has been in the news. They were in the news last July. They were exposed to a third party. Their data was through ransomware. So they've been in the news in the past, but this is completely unrelated, new incident that happened starting early September. They started noticing suspicious activity on the network on September 1st, and they went immediately into containment. And a lot of credit where credit is due. They maintained the actual transportation network itself, meaning the trains were moving, buses moving, and so on. They were okay with losing specific portions of their systems, such as the scheduling, some of the other ancillary systems, the Oyster card. So if you ride the tubes, you have a card that's a pass that gives you access onto the trains. Those stopped working and so on, but they still maintained the capabilities to keep the transportation moving, which was good. So there were service disruptions without a doubt, but the actual the transportation functions were up and running, minimal impact there. They also started working right off the bat with the National Cybersecurity Center, NCSC, as well as the National Crime Agency. So they immediately found assistance in dealing with a particular threat and the issue. So hats off to them for, again, following best practices, getting the authorities involved very quickly, very early. And that led to an arrest on September 15th. The 17-year-old was arrested as the suspect for breaching their system. September 12th, they basically confirmed that there was sensitive customer data, including the bank details of approximately 5,000 users of their Oyster card bank details. So there was definitely a personal impact as well. And again, credit where credit is due. They're disclosing this, being as transparent as they possibly can at the moment. Now, talk about losing trust in the network. What did they do that I haven't seen anyone do in a really long time at this scale? Is they're requiring they shut off access to all roughly 30,000 employees. And force them to come in person with their identification to get re-credentialed onto the network. This is a major undertaking.
Wow. In person.
That is wild. Wow.
So, it's going to take over 2 weeks in order to get that done. With that said, they said as far as the systems that are being impacted, they don't know exactly for sure how long it's going to take to get everything up and running and to operational status. as of, I think, last week, new Oyster cards could not be reissued. So kids and people over 60 plus years old were riding for free, giving them access to transportation without any issues.
Hold on a second. Can I just jump in?
You absolutely just did.
Okay. Too bad. So by authenticating everyone physically, the exercise is to see if there are credentials that are not being validated by someone physical in order to eliminate them. Is that the
make sure that they actually have trusted users, the gain trust again back to the users on their networks. Rather than just doing a password reset and pushing an SMS update to somebody who might have actually had their phone compromised or
so they're wiping everyone and reinstating them.
You got it.
Okay. Wow.
You got
it. That's one way of eliminating an insider threat, I guess.
Correct.
Until there's identity theft and some guy takes someone's identity and picture.
Well, yeah, then they'll have to do it over again. But wow.
Does your organization qualify to get and keep cyber insurance? Businesses that want a new cyber insurance policy or to renew an existing policy need security controls in place to qualify. Virtual Guardian can assess your eligibility and help you comply cost effectively, improving your security posture and reducing risks to your business. Contact us at 1-800-401-TAC.
So it's quite a response to the issue. They're taking this obviously very seriously. They also publish notifications to users of the TFL network that be aware of phishing scams or text scams posing as TFL. It will not be coming from them. But the highlight of this obviously is the 30,000 user resets, all being done in person.
Excellent. Well, Bill, that was very interesting. Very novel way from those Londoners there to call in 30,000 people. I don't know if it would fly anywhere else, but there you go. Living proof that it actually happened. Thank you very much.
NIST guidelines for that, by the way. So I forgot to add that.
Pardon me. Repeat that, please.
They did follow the NIST guidelines of being able to validate everybody that is getting credentialed access to their system. So they took an extreme measure to do it, but they are following the guidelines.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you to the panel for the hot topics. Very interesting, all of them. And we're going to move on now to our spotlight talk. Our guest, Lisa Jones-Huff from Elastic, is going to share her talk on how AI is impacting the job of cybersecurity analysts. I remind people listening to the talk that if you have any questions that you'd like us to submit to Lisa, just put them in the chat interface of the Zoom. In the chat box of the Zoom interface, I should say. And I'll share those with Lisa. So we'll turn all the spotlights on you, Lisa. The next 15 minutes are yours.
All right. Thank you all. I appreciate it. It was fun, hot topics. I mean, this is my first one doing this, so this has been actually pretty cool. So what I'm going to be talking about today is the impact of AI on cybersecurity, and specifically as it relates to SIEM and security analytics. I when I introduced myself to the team, I've been in the SIEM space for a long, long time, and really know traditional detection techniques, and I've translated and transferred into other more next gen techniques and other companies that are talking about modern SIEMs, where they're leveraging the next gen capabilities, leveraging machine learning and all of that. So I really wanted to lean in to talk about, for those folks who have been on that same journey as I have and have made investments in different products throughout the years, whether it's QRadar, ArcSight, Splunk, LogRhythm, LogLogic, Exabeam, Elastic. I just wanted to just talk about the topic of AI as it may relate to any of these investments. So the first thing that I consider to be is low hanging fruit is, and AI can certainly help with proactive detection. So what does that really mean? It's solution. There are organizations that are introducing AI in very informative ways, in my opinion, and one of the ways that AI can help with proactive detection is that whenever you make an investment in a product, whatever the SIEM solution happens to be, one of the things that when I talk to an organization is that all these organizations say, oh, my alerts are very high fidelity. So when they trigger, you definitely should, triage these things and investigate them further. But when you still have hundreds of them, the question that always gets asked is, where do I start? So this is where AI can certainly come into play, where AI is being used to say, hey, I want to look at your previous 24 hours of alerts, and I want to be able to present to you connectedness across those alerts, and then being able to align what's happening across all of these disparate alerts into what's been discovered, and then basically show you with each of these alerts, where are you in terms of the attack lifecycle, leveraging MITRE, whether it's initial access all the way to boom. You have the ability to leverage AI to do those types of things. So imagine now being able to log into your SIEM and seeing what's been discovered over the last 24 hours as you're starting your shift. So now you have a place to start, and it's giving you a lot of color with regards to all the entities that were involved, the users, their roles in the organization, what's their level of risk, the assets, what's the level of risk to that asset in terms of business context, and the risk profile of those assets. So now AI is giving folks the ability to get, more informed information so that you can make a decision of whether or not this is something that I need to do in terms of escalating to another tier, or perhaps, making an automated decision to say, I want to deactivate, I want to disable a user credential, or I want to basically isolate a host because of these things that are being discovered. So less human involvement to try to stitch things together, because in history, historical perspective, when I would get an alert, I would want to know what led up to that alert. Then more important, what happened after the fact. And depending on the level of expertise, and it could take some time to put that story together. Can it happen? Absolutely. But AI can have a massive impact by doing a lot of that heavy lifting for you. The other topic the next topic I want to really talk about in terms of proactive detection is the use of anomaly detection, and, commonly called UEBA. This has been around for the last 5, 6, 7 years, but it is a form of AI, but by leaning into machine learning. And again, in many cases, customers have really leveraged this to really focus on more insider threat type of use cases. I want to understand, what my privileged users are doing. They're allowed to do specific things, but if they're using that privilege to do things that are outside of what's normal, you can establish a baseline of what's normal and then bubble up those things that are anomalies. Now, just because something is being bubbled up as an anomaly doesn't necessarily mean that it's malicious. It's just outside of what's normal. So those are some capabilities that are getting baked in to allow folks to take a more proactive approach. And again, letting the machine do some of that heavy lifting to help with detections. So the next topic I want to talk about is automation. Automation has been around for quite some time. There are products that are called SOAR platforms. The products like Phantom and Demisto, they're named differently now because they've been acquired. But there's a lot of solutions that have been around for quite some time that can do a lot of that automation. If I see something that is outside of what's normal, maybe I want to go and take an action on a firewall and block something, or maybe I want to go into Active Directory and block a user. These types of capabilities have been around for quite some time, and they're typically leveraging, Python or something like that, because these are all API calls. Now imagine overlaying AI as part of this, and which is a lot of these products are doing that, where instead of having to make an investment in a solution, I strongly believe that AI is going to have a massive impact in terms of enhancing the automation capability, because again, all these things are relying on APIs. So you can leverage the AI engines to understand historical patterns and make informed decisions. Now, these types of decisions have been baked into products for years. It's one of the things that got FireEye very popular, being able to be in line and make an informed decision. But in many cases, customers weren't making the decision to take action. But by leveraging AI and really thinking about it in the context of automation, AI is going to be able to be inserted and to be able to, because it has the ability to look at vast amount of data and make some predictive decisions, and be able to make these types of decisions because it can automatically do these API calls. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that, source solutions are going to go away, the way of the dinosaur, but I do believe that the AI capabilities with regards to automation are going to become more and more front and center and more baked into these SIEM solutions and less as an individual solution that a customer adds on or bolts on to their analytics platform. The next topic I wanted to talk about was threat intelligence. We was one of the hot topics, and when we talked about recorded future. And again, because the AI engines have the ability to go through mass amounts of data in a very, very quick way, it's going to be able to bubble up actionable intelligence, especially when you start to think about not something that's not just something that's happening net new, but if you have a lot of data that you have from a historical perspective, AI has the ability to take all of those things into account and really produce actionable intelligence. And I do think that that's going to help inform the analyst experience in a very broad way. The next thing I want to talk about is strengthening vulnerability management, predictive vulnerability detection. So again, being able to lean into AI. And again, this is all about data and being able to allow these AI engines to have access to data so that it can make informed decisions, because then you can start to understand, you have all of these hosts within my environment, and over the last 30 days or over the last 60 days, over the last 90 days, I've seen these vulnerabilities that have occurred on these systems. And because of having that historical reference, these engines are going to be able to, through AI, start to predict that, hey, based on what we've seen historically speaking, you may want to raise the level of risk on this specific asset. So if I have anything that's coming in net new that may be targeting that asset, raise the level of risk because of the information that I've been able to glean about the history of that asset. And again, AI is going to have the ability to do that in a very fast way. So again, these are just different things that from my perspective, that I think that AI is going to make a difference. People have been using vulnerability scan solutions for a number of years, but I think that with the infusion of AI, these solutions are going to become even more powerful. The next topic I want to talk about is AI assisted, SOCs. A lot of vendors are talking about their assistants and these chat bots and things like that. Where I see the true impact is when you think about an organization that does have a formal SOC and they have a formal, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 hunt teams and things like that. One of the things that I see customers struggle with every day is, when you think about people, process, technology, typically, people have a tendency of blaming their technology as the problem, but it's more about people and process. So I think that infusing AI to help the tier 1s, tier 2s gain a bit more efficiency. And, with the addition of, things like RAG, when I say RAG, retrieval augmented generation, you have the ability to help, add more context and color to these large language models before it's spitting out a response. So you can add more context. So I believe that now that you have these AI assistants, when I have these alerts that are happening, or if I have these discoveries that are stitching things together, there's typically going to be, what do I do next moment? So with a tier 1, tier 2, you have the ability to gain a bit more efficiency with these tier 1, tier 2s, because now I can start to ask some questions. And now I have the ability to say, okay, I see that these things have happened. I see the entities that may be involved. And I also see that there is potentially data exfiltration that's happened. Maybe I want to ask the question based on the playbooks that I'm able to bake in to this process. I want to ask the question, who else beyond my SOC team do I want to escalate this to? Maybe compliance, maybe legal, and things of that nature. And you have the ability to leverage natural language and ask these AI assistants and lean into these large language models and get informed responses from that. So I think that by leveraging these assistants in the right way, and also introducing, RAG into the mix with that added context, I think that this is going to give folks the ability to get more efficiency out of their tier 1, tier 2s, and allow their tier 3s and their hunt teams to really laser focus on those deeper dive, investigations that need to be investigated, and spend a lot less time on things that a tier 1 or tier 2 resource should be able to handle. The last topic I want to talk about is when you start to think about introducing AI into the mix. Obviously, data privacy comes into play. So obviously, there are low-hanging fruit things that anyone that's considering introducing AI into their SOC or their incident response program is data privacy has to be taken into account. A lot of these products that are introducing these capabilities as part of the analyst experience and the analyst workflows are baking in the ability to choose before I send anything outbound to these publicly available large language models. I want to choose what I want to obfuscate. I want to choose the fields in my schema that do not get presented. So they're obfuscated before it's sent out to these large language models. So those are things that obviously, data privacy concerns always need to be taken into account. And the cool thing is that because again, I strongly believe that AI is still very nascent. And I think that as products start to mature over time, you're really going to start to see the true power of really leaning in and leveraging AI to do some really cool and crazy things. And for me, one of the biggest things that I see customers struggling with is when you think about migrations. If I've been using a SIEM, one security analyst product or a SIEM over time, and then I start to think about, okay, it's a paradigm shift, maybe moving from one product to the next, but how do I know that I can get the same outcomes and my use case is solved in this other solution? This is another way that folks can leverage and lean into AI, especially if someone is potentially using Custo or using SPL as a query language and they're used to using those products, and they have these queries and, they're well baked and there's humans that are maintaining them. I want to know if what I'm trying to solve with this query can be solved with this other product. And that's where AI capabilities can come into play, where you can present these queries to these AI assistants, and it'll translate those into what the other vendors' detection technique would actually be. So for me, that's the power, and that's just scratching the surface of what I believe that how AI is going to impact SIEM and analytics solutions.
Do you need to report a cyber threat? Virtual Guardian's emergency response team can take immediate action. Responding and recovery are vital to ensure your business-critical services are maintained. Visit virtualguardian.com and click on Report a Cyber Threat in the upper right-hand corner, or call us at 1-800-401-TECH. That's 1-800-401-8324.
Very, very interesting, Lisa. So lots to unpack there. With those 9 topics, my attention was like, I love the SOC. I've always loved anything SOC related. That blue team approach, to monitoring and to keeping an eye on things. You say that AI, infusing AI would help tier 1, tier 2, those employees there that. They're kind of drinking from the fire hose sometimes with so many alerts and incidents coming through. But is that the same? Because your third topic was automation, was SOAR. Are you talking about, when you say infusing AI for tier 1 and tier 2 in the SOC, is that SOAR as well?
No, that's outside of SOAR, because, I think that a lot of people, when you talk about the SOAR topic and automation, this is, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but, what I typically find is that people are only using maybe 25% of the capabilities that a SOAR platform can actually present. Right. SOAR platforms are fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but typically they're just automating, low hanging fruit things like virus total lookups or detonating something in a sandbox. What I'm saying is lean into the automation that some of these analytics platforms naturally bake into the products, whereby, there are products that are out there that have the ability, like an Elastic, where we have the ability to stitch these things together for these analysts. Because typically, if you didn't have that, a human would have to be involved in understanding what led up to something that caused that alert to trigger. And more important, what happened after the fact.
Right.
That's where the AI capability can do that heavy lifting for you and do that stitching of those things together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Absolutely. Let me panel, any questions, anything to add? I'm going to double check.
Question. Do you see the requirements for a tier 2 engineer changing over time with the AI capabilities?
That's a very, very good question, Bill. I think that if this is done properly, and from my point of view, I think that tier 1, tier 2s will stay in seat a lot longer, because I think that because the AI capabilities gives you the ability to bring in information about the enterprise into these platforms, because previous to that, you just had the logs themselves, but you need that context about the business. If I'm able to present that at the tier 1 level, I can see a lot more efficiencies, and they can get to understanding, is this a true threat, a lot faster? They're going to enjoy their jobs a lot more. And I think that they'll stay in seat longer, and then gives them a path to getting up to tier 2, tier 3 and beyond. That's from my perspective.
No, I agree. I think it will help assist with triage remediation, but also eliminate burn rate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, staying in their seat. I like the comment. Yeah. Okay. Let me see if there's any questions in the chat. There is. If a company is looking to do more with generative AI and wants to incorporate it into the way it manages cybersecurity, what are the things that it needs to consider?
Data privacy, from my perspective, first and foremost, data privacy, and the fact that all these language models, what they've been trained on, you got to take all those things into consideration. That's why things like RAG are important, because now you have the ability to infuse more insights, into what's going to actually get presented to the large language models in advance. So I think that taking those things into account, again, it comes down to context. That does matter, in my opinion.
I guess at the very least is also be wary of automating the responses from an AI. You need to have probably a buffer of a human validation before automating a response, right? Initially, at least.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think that anything that's going to disrupt the business needs to have a human in front of it. Yeah. Just like with SOAR, we talked about with SOAR. Right. I mean, doing a virus total lookup, have at it. But if someone is saying, I need to, knock someone off that's a VIP or a critical person within the environment, or something that's going to disrupt the day-to-day inner workings of a business, that is not something that you want to have AI make that decision. You definitely want to have humans involved in that.
Absolutely. Cool. I think we're going to see it across the board. I don't think it's I'm not saying anything that anybody I don't think hasn't foreseen or anything, but I think AI will be embedded in all SOC facets and data facets. I don't know if
across the stack everywhere.
It's going to be across the stack. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And you can see it also at Black Hat and the different trade shows and the vendors and the websites everywhere. AI is prevalent, and I think it's a pretty useful thing. We got to remember that the bad guys have it as well.
That's exactly right.
We have to do our part and use it to kind of defend ourselves. Lisa, thank you very much. That was a very, very interesting spotlight talk. It kind of makes you think and brings a whole bunch of questions.
That's right.
I don't know if the panels have any last words on that before I move on. We're good. Oh. Okay. Great stuff. So let's get to the big finish. I want to thank our panelists, my usual sidekicks, Patrick Naoum, Bill Strub, and Jason Williams for all their insights. Thanks, guys. I want to thank Lisa Jones-Huff of Elastic for her spotlight talk, participation in the show, the hot topic. That was great stuff, Lisa. Thank you very much.
you.
If you are listening to the show and you've missed any part of today's event, the podcast will be made available sometime next week. Remember that you can find past episodes wherever quality podcasts are shared. And we're going to have another great show for you next month, as it will include an interview with an IT manager that suffered through a serious security breach. And that's a rare thing sometimes to get that interview with people that want to share the bad times and why the bad times happen sometimes can be difficult to share. But how
hopefully for the rest of us to avoid
correct. It's super helpful. It's a bit painful sometimes, but it's super helpful for everybody else. So you won't want to miss that on next month's show. And you notice that I didn't say who it is or who it was. You'll have to attend next month to find that out. And of course, you, dear listener, thank you very much for your continued support. Without you, we wouldn't be on episode 24. So we're on a 24 already, which is pretty cool. And remember,
that's the Stanley Cup record for the Montreal Canadiens.
There, you had to drop that in.
More left.
I'll allow it.
Go Steelers.
Bleu, blanc, rouge forever. Bleu, blanc, rouge forever. Remember, everybody, when you're behind the shield, you're ahead of the game. Thank you, everybody.
See you there, folks. Thanks so much.